My parents started living in my house, and when my older brother also moved in, he asked for the master bedroom and half of the house as personal space. I kicked them all out. So, I'm 26M, living with my parents in a house I pay for in full. It sounds pretty basic, but it's way more complicated than that. Let me start from the beginning. I bought a house in the city last year. I cover the entire mortgage, pay for all the bills, groceries, you name it. My parents, Liz, 52F, and Tom, 55M, both retired teachers, don't pay a dime. It wasn't a move back home because I couldn't afford rent situation either. In fact, I make good money as a software engineer, and I wanted to be closer to job opportunities in the city. Plus, I thought it would be nice to help them out after they spent years supporting me. It's a nice 3-bedroom house, nothing extravagant, but cozy with a backyard and a spacious living room. Since I pay for everything, I claim the master bedroom. It has a walk-in closet and its own bathroom, which is clutch because I hate sharing a bathroom with anyone. The second bedroom is my home office. I work from home about 80% of the time, so I set it up with dual monitors, a comfy chair, and everything I need. The third bedroom was left as a guest room for when family visited. At first, everything was great. My parents were happy to be in the city and did their own thing while I worked and took care of the house. I didn't mind footing the bills because, hey, they're my parents, and it felt good to be able to support them after all they'd done for me. But then things changed. One morning, over breakfast, my mom dropped a casual bombshell. She mentioned that my older brother Jake, 28M, and his wife Emma, 26F, were thinking of moving to the city. Emma's pregnant, and apparently, they've been struggling. She said they could really use the help. I didn't think much of it at first. Jake and Emma have always jumped from one bad situation to another. But I assumed if they moved, they'd get a small apartment nearby. That's when things took a turn I wasn't prepared for. A few days later, my mom sat me down with her best innocent tone and told me they had invited Jake and Emma to come stay with us. Just for a little while, until they got back on their feet. Now, they didn't ask if I was okay with this. Oh no, they told me after they'd already invited them. I was still processing the whole thing when Jake and Emma showed up with bags in hand, clearly planning to stay for the long haul. Here's the deal. Jake and Emma moved in, and right off the bat, it was clear they had no plans to leave anytime soon. I'm already stressed, thinking about the extra expenses I'm going to incur. I'm paying for everything, groceries, utilities, the mortgage, everything. And now, I've got 2 more people to support, with no one asking how I feel about it. I love my brother, but Jake is, well, not the most responsible person. He always finds himself in messy situations, and everyone else ends up bailing him out. Emma is nice enough, but she has this entitled attitude that rubs me the wrong way. Like because she's pregnant, the world should cater to her. The tension started building almost immediately. A few days after they moved in, Emma started making these little comments. You know, the kind that seem harmless but are actually annoying as hell. Stuff like, this place is so big, it must be hard for you to clean it all by yourself. Or, we're going to need a lot of space for the baby stuff when it gets here. I didn't think too much of it at first, but then one evening, things escalated. Jake and Emma pulled me aside and said they wanted to talk. I thought maybe they were going to apologize for the extra burden they were putting on me, or maybe offer to help out financially. But no. Emma, all casual, says, so we've been thinking, it'd make more sense if we took the master bedroom. I blinked, thinking I must have misheard. But Jake jumped in with, yeah, the baby's going to need a lot of stuff, and your room has the walk-in closet and private bathroom. Let me remind you, I pay the mortgage, I pay for everything, and these 2 were sitting here suggesting I give up my own room for them and their unborn child. The audacity hit me all at once. I managed to keep calm and said, why don't you just take the guest room? It's plenty big. Emma gave me a look like I just suggested something outrageous. That room doesn't have a walk-in closet, she said. The baby's going to need space. I was done. I'm not giving up my room. You can have the guest room, or you can find somewhere else to stay. Jake looked a little shocked, like he couldn't believe I wasn't just caving in. But Emma? She was downright offended. That's when I knew this wasn't going to end well. Things started going downhill fast. The next couple of days, I noticed Jake and Emma getting really comfortable. Their stuff was everywhere. Shoes kicked off by the couch, baby magazines scattered on the dining table. Emma even started talking about where she was going to put the crib, like she had already decided that they were going to stay in the master bedroom. One day, I had to go into the office for a meeting. When I got home, my blood ran cold. My personal stuff, clothes, computer monitor, everything, was in the hallway. I stormed into the master bedroom, and there was Emma, casually packing up the last of my things like it was no big deal. "What the hell are you doing?" I blurted out. She didn't even flinch. "Your mom said we could start moving in here. The baby's coming soon, and we need the space." I was livid. "I told you, you're not taking my room." Emma crossed her arms. "The guest room is too small." I wasn't having it. "I don't care. You're not taking my room. You can stay in the guest room, or find somewhere else to live." At this point, Emma was upset, but I didn't care. I stormed out of the room, grabbed my phone, and called my mom, who wasn't even home at the time. "Mom, did you tell Jake and Emma they could move into my room?" There was a long pause. Finally, she admitted, "Well, I thought it would be the best solution. They need the space, and you've already got the office. It's not like you're using the master bedroom for much." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you serious? I pay the mortgage, I pay the bills, and you think it's okay for them to take over my room?" She tried to calm me down, saying it wasn't a big deal, but I was done listening. "I'm not giving them my room. If they don't move their stuff out, they're going to need to find another place to stay." Emma must have overheard me because she stormed out, looking furious. "You're seriously going to throw us out with a baby on the way?" Jake, who had been outside, walked in, hearing the commotion. "What's going on?" I laid it out for him. "What's going on is your wife is trying to take my room, and I'm telling you both it's not happening. Stay in the guest room or leave." Jake wasn't happy. He tried pulling the whole "we're family" card, but I wasn't budging. I told them they had until the end of the day to move their stuff out of my room, or I'd do it for them. Jake glared at me, but Emma stormed off, slamming the door. I retreated to my office, knowing this was far from over after that blow-up. I figured Jake and Emma might finally back off. I mean, I was clear as day. My room wasn't up for grabs. They could either stay in the guest room or leave. Seemed simple enough, right? But of course, things didn't go that smoothly. The next morning, the house was weirdly quiet. Too quiet. I stayed in my office most of the day, not wanting to deal with more drama. When dinner time rolled around, I came out to grab something to eat, and that's when things got even worse. I opened the fridge, only to find it practically empty. I had just bought groceries 2 days ago, and now most of it was gone. The freezer was pretty bare too. I knew my parents didn't eat like that, and it sure wasn't me. So it had to be Jake and Emma. They'd helped themselves to everything without even asking. I was already irritated, but I tried to brush it off. I figured I'd just go grocery shopping again tomorrow. But it wasn't just the food. When I sat down at the table, my mom came into the kitchen, avoiding eye contact with me. She quietly made plates for herself, my dad, Jake, and Emma, but she didn't make one for me. At first, I thought maybe she forgot. But then she finished serving everyone, sat down, and started eating. I was left sitting there, staring at them, like an idiot. I looked at my mom, trying to keep my cool. "You didn't make me a plate?" I asked. She barely glanced up. "You don't want to help the family? You don't eat with the family," she said, as casually as if she were talking about the weather. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Excuse me? I pay for everything here. The groceries, the mortgage, and now you're freezing me out." My dad didn't say a word, just sighed and kept eating like it was no big deal. Jake and Emma? They were sitting there with these smug looks on their faces, like they'd won some kind of power play. Emma even smiled at me when I walked by. It was so passive-aggressive, I almost lost it right there. I slammed the fridge door and stormed out of the kitchen. I couldn't take it anymore. I wasn't about to be treated like an outsider in my own house, the house I paid for. I went straight to my room, grabbed my laptop, and started looking up how to serve eviction notices. Enough was enough. Within an hour, I had the documents ready. I printed 2 sets, one for Jake and Emma, and one for my parents. It felt weird, kicking out my own family, but they had crossed too many lines. They didn't respect me, and I wasn't going to keep letting them walk all over me. Once the notices were printed, I walked back into the living room where everyone was sitting. I didn't say a word. I just slapped the papers down in front of my parents and handed the other set to Jake and Emma. Jake looked confused. "What's this?" he asked, scanning the papers. "You have 24 hours to pack your things and leave," I said, keeping my voice as calm as I could. "If you're not out by tomorrow, I'm calling the police." Jake's face went pale. He clearly hadn't expected this. "You can't be serious," he muttered. "Oh, I'm dead serious," I replied. "I'm done with this. You've been freeloading here without contributing a thing, and now you think you can take over my house? No, not anymore." Jake stood up, glaring at me like he was ready for a fight, but I didn't budge. I was taller, bigger, and definitely not intimidated by his little temper tantrum. "We're family," he said through gritted teeth. "You can't just throw us out." "Yes, I can," I said, stepping closer. "I pay for this house, not you. Not Emma. Not Mom or Dad. If you can't respect me, you don't get to live here." Emma, of course, started crying, playing the victim. "I'm pregnant, and you're kicking us out? What kind of brother are you?" "I'm the brother who's been paying for everything while you two take advantage of me," I shot back. "You have 24 hours. That's more than generous." Jake looked like he wanted to argue more, but I could see the realization sinking in. I wasn't bluffing. My mom, who had been sitting there quietly this whole time, finally spoke up. "You can't do this, honey. They're your brother and sister-in-law. This is family." I didn't care anymore. "I've already done it," I said, pointing to the eviction notice in her hands. "You've got 30 days to find somewhere else too. If you're not gone by then, I'll be taking legal action." The room went dead silent. My dad didn't say a word. He just stared at the table, looking completely lost. My mom looked like she was about to cry, but I wasn't backing down. This wasn't about being nice anymore. This was about standing up for myself and not letting them walk all over me. After a few tense minutes, I turned and walked back to my room, leaving them to process everything. I locked the door, sat down at my desk, and took a deep breath. I had just done something I never thought I'd have to do, kick out my own family. But you know what? It felt good. It felt right. I wasn't going to be taken advantage of anymore. The house was eerily quiet for the rest of the night. No one came to my door, and no one tried to argue with me. I think they finally realized I wasn't messing around anymore. If they didn't respect me, they didn't deserve to live in my house. I slept better that night than I had in weeks. Update 1. After handing out the eviction notices, I expected either an explosion of drama or for everyone to finally take me seriously. But instead, the house got quiet. Uncomfortably quiet. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, partly because I couldn't sleep. I was waiting for something to happen. Maybe Jake would bang on my door, demanding I change my mind, or my parents would try to plead with me. But none of that happened. I got up, walked into the kitchen, and the house was completely empty. No Jake, no Emma, no parents. I even wondered if they'd packed up and left in the middle of the night. Wishful thinking, I guess. I made my coffee and sat at the table, waiting for someone to say something. Anything. I wasn't in the mood to make small talk or explain myself again. I had drawn my line, and I wasn't backing down. They'd pushed me too far, and there was no way I could keep living like that. They didn't respect me, and they sure as hell didn't respect the fact that I was paying for everything. After a while, my mom came into the kitchen. She looked like she hadn't slept much. She didn't say anything at first, just grabbed a cup of coffee and sat across from me. The silence was awkward, like neither of us knew what to say. Finally, she broke the silence. "Honey," she said, her voice soft and tired. "I know things have gotten out of hand." I didn't say anything, just stared at my coffee, waiting for her to continue. I knew an apology of some kind was coming, but I wasn't about to let her off the hook that easily. "I didn't realize how bad things had gotten between you and your brother," she continued, her voice cracking a little. "We were just trying to help them, and I guess I didn't see how unfair it was to you." That caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting her to admit it, at least not so soon. For a moment, I thought maybe she was finally getting it, that I wasn't the villain in this situation. But I still couldn't shake off the frustration from everything that had happened. "You didn't just ignore what I wanted," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. You sided with them every single time, like you just assumed I'd roll over and let them take whatever they wanted. She looked down at her coffee, not saying anything for a few seconds. I know, she said quietly, but we thought, well, you've always been the strong one. Jake, he's never had it easy. That was her excuse every time. Jake wasn't strong. Jake had struggled more. Jake needed more support. It was like they didn't think I had any limits because I was the one who had my life together. And you think I've had it easy? I asked, my anger simmering just beneath the surface. I'm the one who bought this house. I pay the mortgage. I pay for the groceries. I've been carrying all of you. And you think I can just keep doing that forever? She sighed and nodded. You're right. You've done a lot more than we could have asked for. But Jake, with the baby on the way, I cut her off. This isn't about the baby. This is about respect. And you guys haven't shown me any. She sighed again, looking exhausted. We thought we were doing the right thing, she finally said. Jake and Emma, they don't have much. And whose fault is that? I shot back. I didn't ask them to move in. I didn't ask for any of this. They need to figure out their own lives. And you can't keep bailing them out by throwing me under the bus. She nodded, finally seeming to understand. Or at least trying to. We'll figure something out, she said, her voice quieter now. But please don't push us out. Not like this. I sat back, trying to calm down. I didn't want to kick them out. They were my parents. But at the same time, I couldn't keep living like this. Either things changed, or they'd have to go. I don't want to push you out, I said, as calmly as I could. But things need to change. I can't keep living like this, being treated like I don't matter in my own house. She didn't argue, just nodded quietly. Okay, she said. We'll figure something out. After that, she left the kitchen, and I was alone again with my thoughts. I wasn't sure if anything would really change, but at least it seemed like they were starting to take me seriously. Later that afternoon, Jake finally showed up, looking like he'd been stewing in his anger all day. He didn't say hi or anything when he walked into the living room. He just plopped down across from me with that same pissed-off expression he'd had since I gave him the eviction notice. I didn't say anything either, just kept my eyes on my phone. So, this is how it's going to be. He finally spat, bitterness dripping from his voice. You're really going to kick us out? I barely looked up. I gave you 24 hours. If you're still here tomorrow, I'm calling the police. Jake scoffed, shaking his head like I was the bad guy. We're family. You don't do this to family. I put my phone down and leaned back in my chair. Yeah, well, family doesn't take advantage of each other either. You've been freeloading for weeks without contributing anything, and now you think you can just take over my house? I'm not your fallback plan, Jake. He didn't have much to say after that. He sat there for a minute, clearly wanting to argue. But there wasn't anything left to say. I'd laid out my terms, and he knew I wasn't bluffing. After a few more moments of tense silence, Jake got up, muttering under his breath, and stormed off again. Typical Jake, always running when things didn't go his way. The rest of the day passed quietly, almost too quietly. I didn't know what Jake and Emma were going to do, but I wasn't about to change my mind. I'd given them more than enough time to figure things out, and they had done nothing but mooch off me. The next 24 hours would decide everything. Update 2. The morning of their eviction deadline, I woke up early again. I knew today was the day Jake and Emma either packed up and left or forced me to take legal action. Strangely, I didn't feel angry anymore. I wasn't even anxious. I had accepted what needed to happen, and now it was just about following through. I got up, went into the kitchen, and the house was still eerily quiet. It felt different, almost like the calm before a storm. I made myself some breakfast, though the fridge was still looking pretty bare after Jake and Emma's last grocery raid. I managed to scrounge up enough for a decent meal, and while I sat there eating, I couldn't help but think about how fast everything had spiraled out of control. Just a few months ago, everything was fine. My parents and I had a good thing going. I was working, paying the bills, and life was good. Then Jake and Emma showed up, and everything went to hell. It's crazy how quickly things can change when people start feeling entitled to things they didn't earn. A couple of hours later, I heard footsteps in the hallway. My dad walked into the kitchen, grabbed a cup of coffee, and sat down at the table across from me. He didn't say anything at first, just sipped his coffee and stared out the window. I wasn't sure if he was mad at me or if he just didn't know what to say. Finally, he broke the silence. "Jake and Emma are leaving today," he said quietly. I didn't respond right away. Part of me felt bad, but the bigger part of me knew this was the right thing to do. I couldn't keep letting them take advantage of me, and if that meant they had to leave, so be it. "They don't have anywhere to go," my dad added, his voice low. "They're going to stay at a motel for a while until they figure things out." I stopped mid-bite and looked at him. Part of me did feel a little guilty, but I quickly pushed that feeling away. I'd given them time, plenty of time, to get their act together, and they hadn't done a thing to help themselves. "I gave them a chance," I said, keeping my voice steady. "They left me no choice." My dad didn't argue. He didn't try to guilt-trip me like I thought he would. He just nodded, taking another sip of his coffee. I think he finally understood that I wasn't going to back down this time. After all that had happened, there was no way we could go back to how things were. Around noon, Jake and Emma started packing their things. I stayed in my room for most of it, not wanting to get into another argument or hear more passive-aggressive comments. But after a while, I could hear Jake's voice getting louder from down the hall, so I knew something was about to go down. Sure enough, Jake knocked on my door. I opened it, and there he was, standing there with the same pissed-off look he'd had since this whole thing started. "You're really going to let this happen?" he asked, his voice sharp. "You're just going to kick us out like this?" I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorframe. "I gave you 24 hours. You know what needed to happen." Jake clenched his jaw, clearly trying to keep his temper in check. "We're family, man. You don't do this to family." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Family doesn't take advantage of each other. I'm not kicking you out for no reason. You've been freeloading here for weeks, without contributing anything. I've been paying the mortgage, the groceries, everything. And instead of being grateful, you tried to take my room and push me out of my own house. I'm not going to let that happen." Jake didn't say anything for a few seconds. I could tell he was mad, but there was nothing left for him to argue. He knew I was right, even if he didn't want to admit it. "So that's it, huh?" he finally muttered, his voice low. "You're just throwing us out." "I'm giving you the same option I gave you yesterday," I replied. "You can find somewhere else to live, or you can stay in the guest room and respect my space. But if you can't do that, then yeah, you're leaving." Jake stared at me for a moment longer before turning and walking away without another word. I closed the door and let out a long breath. This whole situation had been exhausting, but I knew it had to be done. By mid-afternoon, Jake and Emma were gone. I didn't see them leave, and honestly, I didn't want to. There was no need for some emotional goodbye. They packed up their stuff, loaded it into their car, and drove off without saying a word to me. The house felt different after they left, quieter, less tense. My parents didn't say much to me for the rest of the day. I think they were still processing everything that had happened. My mom looked upset, but she didn't say anything about it. Maybe she finally realized that I wasn't the one who caused all this. Jake and Emma had pushed me too far, and this was the result. That evening, my mom knocked on my door. She came in, sat down on the edge of my bed, and stared at the floor for a while. I could tell she was trying to find the right words. "They're gone," she said softly. I nodded, not saying anything. "I never thought it would get to this point," she admitted. "I didn't realize how much pressure we were putting on you." I looked at her, feeling a little bit of the frustration lift. "It's not that I didn't want to help," I said, trying to explain my side. "But you guys treated me like I didn't matter, like my needs and my space weren't important." She sighed, nodding. "You're right. We should have seen it sooner." We sat in silence for a few minutes, neither of us really knowing what to say next. I could tell she was upset, but at least now she seemed to understand where I was coming from. "I don't want you and Dad to leave," I said after a while, breaking the silence. "But if things don't change, I can't live like this." She nodded again, standing up slowly. "We'll figure it out," she promised. "Things will be different. I swear." As she left the room, I felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. The situation with Jake and Emma was finally over, but there was still work to be done with my parents. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but at least now it felt like they were willing to listen. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could finally breathe again. The house was quiet, and the tension that had been suffocating me was gone. It wasn't a perfect solution, but at least now I had my space back, and most importantly, I had my respect. After Jake and Emma left, the house settled into an eerie calm. It felt like I could finally breathe again, but the whole situation still lingered in the back of my mind. I had won the battle for my room and my respect, but it left me wondering if things would ever really go back to normal with my parents. I had drawn a hard line, and there was no going back. Still, I hoped that we could find a way to move forward without all the tension. The days that followed were quiet, almost too quiet. My parents kept mostly to themselves. My mom would occasionally say something polite, but we didn't talk about what had happened. My dad, always the more reserved one, seemed to avoid any potential for confrontation altogether. I wasn't sure if this was their way of giving me space, or if they were still processing everything that had happened. Either way, I didn't mind the silence. I spent most of my time in my home office, throwing myself into work to avoid thinking about everything. The office was my sanctuary now, my escape from all the drama that had unfolded over the past few weeks. But every once in a while, I'd catch myself thinking about how things had gone down. I couldn't help but feel a little bad for how it had all exploded, but at the same time, I knew I had done the right thing. I had been taken for granted for too long, and something had to give. About a week after Jake and Emma left, my mom came into my office while I was working. I could tell from the way she hovered at the door that she had something on her mind. "Do you have a minute?" she asked, her voice unusually soft. I nodded, saving my work and turning to face her. "What's up?" She stepped into the room, wringing her hands nervously. "I've been thinking about everything, about Jake, Emma, and how we've treated you." I stayed quiet, letting her speak. It seemed like she needed to get something off her chest. "I just wanted to say, we didn't mean to make you feel like you didn't matter," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "We thought we were helping Jake, but I see now that we were putting too much on you. You've done so much for us, more than we ever could have asked for, and we took advantage of that." "I'm sorry." The apology caught me off guard. I had expected some kind of acknowledgement eventually, but hearing her say it so directly hit harder than I anticipated. I could see the sincerity in her eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like she truly understood what I had been feeling. "I appreciate that, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But it wasn't just about the money or the house. It was about respect. I felt like you guys didn't respect me or what I was doing to keep things running. I didn't mind helping, but I couldn't keep living like that. She nodded, wiping a tear from the corner of her eye. "You're right. We should have respected your boundaries. It won't happen again." I wasn't one for drawn-out emotional conversations, but this one felt necessary. It was like a weight had been lifted, and I could finally see a path forward that didn't involve constant tension and resentment. My mom gave me a small, apologetic smile before heading back to the kitchen. I sat there for a few minutes, processing the conversation. It wasn't a full resolution, but it was a step in the right direction. The real turning point came a couple of weeks later. By then, the house had settled into a new routine. My parents were more respectful of my space, and the awkward tension that had filled every room since Jake and Emma's departure had slowly dissipated. I could finally feel the house becoming a home again, instead of the war zone it had been for the last few months. One evening, I came home from a meeting at the office to find my dad sitting at the kitchen table, looking unusually serious. Normally, my dad wasn't one for heavy talks. He left most of that to my mom. But something about the way he was sitting, staring into his cup of coffee, told me he had something important to say. "Hey," I said, trying to keep things casual as I grabbed a drink from the fridge. "Everything okay?" He looked up, his expression thoughtful. "I've been meaning to talk to you." I sat down across from him, curious but not too worried. "About what?" He took a deep breath, leaning forward with his hands clasped in front of him. "About the house, and everything you've been doing to keep this place going." I stayed quiet, sensing that he needed to get this off his chest. "I know I haven't said much," he began, his voice low, "but I've been thinking about it a lot. You've done more for this family than any of us ever expected, and I want you to know that I appreciate it." I was taken aback. My dad wasn't the type to open up like this, so hearing him say those words felt significant. You didn't ask for any of this, he continued, and you've carried more than your fair share. I just want you to know that I see it. And I'm sorry for how things went down with Jake and Emma. I could tell he had been holding on to this for a while, and hearing him acknowledge everything I'd been through hit differently than when my mom had apologized. It wasn't that one meant more than the other, but my dad's quiet nature made his words feel more profound somehow. Thanks, Dad, I said, not sure what else to say. That means a lot. He nodded, taking another sip of his coffee. I just want things to be better. For all of us. It wasn't a long conversation, but it was enough. I could see that he meant it, and in that moment, I felt like things were finally starting to change for the better. In the weeks that followed, things continued to improve. My parents and I found a new rhythm, one that didn't involve me feeling like I was carrying the weight of the household alone. They started pitching in more, helping with groceries, cleaning, and just generally respecting my space. It wasn't perfect, but it was a huge improvement from where we had been. And as for Jake and Emma, well, I didn't hear much from them after they left. My mom mentioned that they were staying in a motel for a while and that they were trying to find a place of their own. I didn't pry. I had made my boundaries clear, and as much as I loved my brother, I needed him to learn how to stand on his own 2 feet. If that meant keeping my distance for a while, so be it. One afternoon, about a month after the whole ordeal, I got a text from Jake. It was short and to the point. Not exactly his usual style, but it seemed sincere. Hey, I know things got messed up. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for how everything went down. We're figuring stuff out, and I hope we can talk soon. I stared at the message for a while, not sure how to respond. Part of me was still angry about how everything had played out, but another part of me appreciated the gesture. I didn't reply right away. I needed more time to process it. That night, I sat down and wrote out a response, trying to keep it civil but clear about where I stood. Thanks for the message. I'm glad you guys are figuring things out. I hope we can talk soon too, but I need some time. Let's catch up when we're both ready. I hit send and felt a strange sense of closure. Things weren't perfect, and I didn't expect them to be, but at least the lines of communication were open again. That was more than I could have hoped for a few weeks ago. As time went on, I found myself feeling more at peace with everything. The house was no longer filled with tension, and my parents were finally respecting my boundaries. I had my space back, and most importantly, I had my sense of control over my life again. It wasn't easy getting here. Standing up for myself, especially against family, had been one of the hardest things I'd ever had to do. But in the end, it was worth it. I had learned a valuable lesson. Respect isn't something you can demand. It's something you have to earn, even within your own family. And I had earned mine. Looking back, I'm glad I didn't back down. It would have been easy to just give in, to let Jake and Emma take over my room, to let my parents keep running the house like I was just another guest. But that wasn't the life I wanted. I wanted my own space, my own sense of dignity. And now, I finally had it. Maybe one day, things with Jake and Emma will be different. Maybe we'll be close again, like we used to be before all this drama. But for now, I'm just focused on living my life the way I need to. And for the first time in a long time, that feels like enough.